What's up, fam, and welcome to another edition of BBI Talks. I am your Professor Karriemah Lotus, and I have a wonderful guest, a great topic. We are actually in part 2 on the conversation about reparations, and I've got Professor Reginald Muhammad today. He's going to come on and he is going to present to us the National Reparations Declaration. We talked about this. We kind of touched on it the last time he was here, and he was dropping official bombs and carrying receipts. So without further ado, we're going to get into our new intro for BBI Talks. Here we go.
We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad. They gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man. Get what I need out the land. The earth is the kingdom of God. Glad that I know where I am. We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad. They gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man. I can supply you the man. Get what I need out the land. Glad that I know where I am.
Welcome back to BBI Talks. I have here in the studio, virtual studio, Professor Reginald Muhammad. For those of you who aren't familiar with our dear brother, he was born in Tallahassee, Florida, but grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida. And he is a political and behavioral scientist at the National Reparations Institute and Summit Incorporated here in the mighty ATL, Atlanta, Georgia. He has authored books such as In Fear of Leading. He has also authored a book entitled No Crystal Stairs and Life and Day in Black LA. I tell you, this brother is just so wonderful. We need more Black men like him to really be willing to commit the hours and hours of research into this very important and critical topic of our reparations. So without further ado, here is Professor Reginald Muhammad. How you doing, Black man?
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Karriemah, Professor Karriemah Muhammad. How are you doing, and how's the family and the audience?
Well,
good to see you.
Doing great, thank the Lotus Christ. How is your family?
Oh, everybody's doing well, under the pandemic and the other life struggles and vicissitudes. Everybody's doing fine. We're moving forward.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, one of the things that we can take from this pestilence, as the minister calls it, of the COVID-19 pandemic is really being able to center ourselves in such a way that we are, number one, communicating with the God, and number two, having the time to really delve into the issues that really matter. Yes. You know, sometimes when we're in the hustle and bustle of building businesses and taking our children to and from school, we really miss out on the things that are most important. And yes, that is, yes, attending to our children. Yes, I'm not saying it's not important. But what I am saying is making sure that we create an environment and a legacy in which they can thrive is very important and is essential to us as a people. So I just want to welcome you back. I want to thank those of you who have logged on to Instagram to join us. Serene Organics, thank you for joining us. Please spread the word that this is an episode that you do not want to miss of BBI Talks. So, Professor Reginald, the last time you were here, we really delved into slavery and the impact of slavery. Well, now we're moving into post-slavery, Jim Crow to current, right? That's the time frame that we're dealing with and beyond.
Yes.
And the beyond. So I'm looking at, and I thank you for sharing with me a sneak copy of the National Reparations Declaration. The first thing I want to ask you, dear brother, is what organization do you represent that is actually responsible for the research and the presentation of this document?
The National Reparations Institute and the National Reparations Summit. That is a organized body here in Atlanta. And Brother Michael Muhammad, heads the organization up for us, and director of operations, and one of the senior research fellows within the National Reparations Institute. So the National Reparations Institute, along with the National Reparations Summit, are responsible for the declaration, the National Declaration for Reparations.
Awesome. And I just, want to read something, if I may.
Yes, please.
Just one paragraph, if it's okay.
Yes.
Okay. And this document comes out this Friday. I want to make it a point to say that, and we're going to mention that a couple of times, especially as it relates to where you can actually get this document. But in the introduction of the document, it reads, after the Civil War, Blacks were given a conditional restricted freedom whereby they were allowed to leave the thousands of plantations illiterate, landless, afraid, and completely dependent on the former slave masters for all their necessities. After being up from chattel slavery now for more than 150 years, all the above issues and conditions are in fact the residual effects of chattel slavery. Can you please speak to that, Brother Reginald, Professor?
Yes. Think about it like this. You have a people that are snatched from Africa, robbed of their names, their language, their culture, their land, and their God. Robbed of their names, language, land, culture, and God. Now, you worked them for 300 years with no pay. They're traumatized, terrorized, tortured, and tormented for all of these centuries. Colonized, chemicalized, castrated, and corrupted. Then, at the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 on into 1865, you say you're free. Free to do what and free to go where? Remember, it's against the law for them to read, to write, to marry, and to establish a family. So, again, they're released based on all the psychological, physical, and financial damage to a people. And you say you're free. Free to do what and free to go where? And so I'm suggesting to you and your audience is that the reparations is about repairing the damage. That damage has never been repaired. So now let's fast forward to 2020, when I can walk across the campus, Karriemah, Sister Karriemah, and to your audience, when I can walk across the campus at the Atlanta University Center, and we still calling each other niggas, bitches, and hoes, and I got to stop college students, and even in the hood, where the National Reparations Institute is, I've got to stop our people from destroying themselves and the community. We can say, well, if Black people just go to work and get educated and be responsible. But here's my thing is, if you say that the problem in Black America is teenage pregnancy, if you said alcohol, the lack of education, you'll say that it's the lack of finance. You'll say it's a lack of not being politically aware and conscious and engaged. I will say to you and your audience, and can prove, those are the results of the problem. That is not the problem. The problem, again, is post-traumatic slave disorder, what you call, Dr. Joy DeGour calls post-traumatic slave disorder. These are the residual effects that we're talking about, and I mentioned earlier on in the National Reparations Declaration. And just to let your audience kind of see, it is coming out this week. But this is one of the things that we talked about early on, the National Reparations Declaration. Again, those are not the problems of Black people. Those are the results of our problem. And again, reparations is about repairing the damage. There is some internal damage. There's external damage. And then, of course, there's some financial and economic damage that was done to Black people. And so a complete reparations package, that's what a complete reparations package looks like. And the National Reparations Declaration, the subtitle is a qualitative and quantitative framework for Black redress. A qualitative and quantitative framework for Black redress. And so we have laid out quickly in this document, it's not 200 pages. It's only 56 pages. No, excuse me, 54 pages. Well, we've laid out the framework of what reparations look like. And what I think is unique about it, we were blessed to do, is that there are reparations organizations who have done an outstanding work in America. All of them have done their part. But what's missing in it is, where is the declaration? Where is the model and the methodology for actually doing it? We can document all of the atrocities. We know all of the setbacks. We understand the residual effect of it. But how do you move a people, the masses of the people, now in the position where they're actually securing reparations? And I'm praying and working that I'm not around 30 years from now, 40, 50 years now, talking about reparations. It's something that we can achieve within the next decade or sooner. We can honestly receive, but there has to be a model and a methodology for doing it. If you say you're going to build a house or a skyscraper, well, let's look at the blueprints. Where is the model for doing this? Where are the blueprints that you have laid out to do that? And that's what the National Declaration for Reparation does for the reparations movement. And that's something that I think is unique about it. And those who will read it, because all of the reparations organizations have their points, their agenda, their 10-point programs and all of that. But again, where is the model and the methodology for actually doing it? And where is the framework for doing it? And I think that's what we attempted to do with the National Declaration for Reparations. So then we crunch the numbers here too. We tell you what the numbers look like because our people are all over the place with the numbers. Well, we come up with a minimum number that the federal government, along with the state and local government, that's number one, who owe us reparations. And then number two, we look at the multinational corporations. Number three, we look at nonprofit organizations that owe reparations also. It's not just the federal government. And then number four, we look at there's still over 40,000 plantations that are still in existence of now more a number of generations that have passed. But these plantations, 40,000 plantations that are still up and operating. Some of them are under different names and foundation and businesses, but they were slave plantations and their families still own them. And how they got that wealth that they still have today is based on the enslavement of Black people in America. So that's some of what we cover and what we do with the National Reparations Declaration. And I think, your audience will find that to be, well documented. It's not just, a bunch of rhetoric and the research on the atrocities. Let's look at the numbers now.
Now, why is it that, and I appreciate you giving, kind of tipping your hat to those organizations who were, your predecessors that were working on the reparations movement and all of the research that they've done. But why is it that there's this gap? Why is this the information in particular that was missing in the overall reparations conversation? Is it a situation where others were making us first justify reparations before we could even talk about the process in which to calculate how much is owed? Where is this coming from? How are you kind of bringing this now, and why wasn't it brought sooner?
Well, that's a good question, Professor Muhammad. One of the things that you find in the reparations movement, like Black America, it's fragmented, it's scattered. And all of the reparations, and one of the things 10 years ago, reparations was looked upon as something extreme and radical. Black middle class or the Black bourgeois sector does not want to deal with that which looks extreme and radical. And then two, when you find Black people that generally don't agree with reparations, it's generally because they don't have the knowledge about reparations or they're afraid of what the white response is. And so now you see a situation where we have Black organizations who have been on the ground, which I'm a member of a number of those organizations. We've done the reparations piece, but in my critique and my criticism of them, legitimate criticism of them, is that that's what was missing in the reparations piece. We've been able to document the atrocities, book after book, essay after essay. But again, 10 years ago, doing graduate work at Clark Atlanta University and working on my master's, I'm going through and I'm like, why is it that we have still not moved the reparations movement forward? And what I discovered is that there, again, a lack of a methodology for doing it. And so if other groups and other cultures have secured reparations, then I had to go back and look at what was the process that they used. Because again, we have told the story for 100 years. There are Blacks in the movement saying, well, we just got to educate Black people more about reparations. I don't think there's more of an educated body of Black people anywhere in the country or around the world about reparations. than right here in America. But again,
right.
why has the needle have not been moved up until now and recently is because, again, where is the model and the methodology for actually doing it? And again, so one of the things that I looked at and we were blessed to do is to develop what I call the collective culture model to actually secure reparations for Blacks in America. And that's some of the criticisms to me from members of the reparations movement and the larger reparations community is like, no way we can, well, reparations, then that might take the next generation, that might be 15, another 20 years. You giving the people the expectation that it won't that's not an expectation realistic. That we cannot that's realistic. Thank you. That's unrealistic. And I say no. How is it that all political and economic major decisions are made in this country by a segment of the white ruling class? Well, I had to go back and look at that, and that's where we come up with the Muhammad quadruple based philosophy, the Muhammad quadruple based philosophy. And the quadruple based philosophy says that all political and economic decisions by a segment of the white ruling class, all of those decisions are based on four different variables or components. Number one, and let me just slow down. Number one is that there is a power base. Number two, there's a profit base. Number three, there's a policy base. And number four, there's a privilege base. Now, their decisions are going to be made. Are those bases enhanced or ill-affected? That's how they make decisions. See, reparations won't come about, Professor Karriemah. It won't come about as a result of us marching, praying to the white ruling class, picketing, petitioning them. That's not how they will make their decisions about reparations. They will make they will make their decision: is it enhancing or ill-affecting their power base, their profit base, their policy base, and their privilege base? Now, you won't find that in a textbook anywhere. That's based on nearly 35 years of observation as a political and behavioral scientist. That I've had a certain level of research and exposure that I've come to those conclusions, and I can prove that point. But that's how reparations will be decided for Black people in America. And at the end of the day, going back to your initial question, is why is there a gap? Well, again, because to a degree, some of the members of the larger reparations movement have not had the opportunity to explore some of the angles and research, just like I have been able, I have been blessed, and others around me have been blessed to do that kind of research for a period of over, well, me being in the movement has been over 25 years. In the last 12 to 13 years, the focal point has been researching, writing, and compiling essays, looking at the empirical data and all of that regarding reparations. So we sit in a position, I think sometimes in a position that we're able to come to those conclusions. And so there is a gap there. But at the end of the day, those of us in the larger reparations movement, we have to come to that realization if we're going to secure reparations for Black people in America. And I know that was a lot. But go ahead.
No. I understand, Professor. And I will, because it's a lot in terms of being able to get everything across.
Yes.
And so that's why we're going to take it kind of step by step. I want to advance this conversation into the actual declaration. And I'm just asking if you can highlight two in each category. So the first one is, I'm noticing you have incorporated how Blacks would benefit from complete reparations, but then you also have how America would benefit from complete reparations. And so I just wanted you to pick just two, it's 7 items for those of you who are planning on getting your copy on Friday of how Blacks would benefit. And I think it's important that this be addressed, because I don't know if we understand what the total benefit is, especially as it relates to our younger generations. I'm curious to know how effective we have really been in expressing to our younger generations the benefits and the importance of reparations. And then for how America would benefit from complete reparations, you have 10 points. So,
Yeah.
Professor, if you wouldn't mind highlighting just 2 from each category, just to kind of give people a sense of what they can expect from this wonderful body of work.
Okay. Let's look at how Blacks would benefit from complete reparations. And I want to stress that before I get into it, complete reparations. You see people around the country saying, well, the city in North Carolina, the state of California, this city, they're looking at reparations. Georgetown is looking at reparations. A number of Black scholars and entertainers have jumped out with packages of how corporations could benefit and how they could pay reparations. But we're talking complete reparations now. Complete reparations, number one, for Blacks, how Blacks will benefit. It would provide massive Black wealth, equipment, and other resources needed to be self-determining, self-sufficient, self-developing, and self-respecting. Let me say that again. How reparations would benefit Black America. It would provide massive Black wealth, equipment, and other resources needed to be self-determining, self-sufficient, self-developing, and self-respecting. Number two, it would provide the necessary resources to restore and transform Black families and communities. Those are just 2, and we have 7 different points to show conclusively how complete reparations will benefit Blacks in America. It is all in the National Declaration. Let's look at how America would benefit from complete reparations. Number one, it will aid in the restoration of the Black family. Professor Karriemah, the Black family becomes key and critical. We can show, and the scholars have documented it well, that the Black family is in need of restoration and repair and transformation. Now, that's what reparations will do. Once we start to get the Black family back intact, a lot of the things that we think that are ills within the community, in the greater societies, those will start to cease and start to be eliminated by the fact that we have the family intact. That's a whole nother
example of that?
Everything. Give an example.
Just what's an example of that?
Give an example. Over the last 30 years, according to Dr. Nathan and Julia Hare out of the Black think tank, they show conclusively over the last 30 years, give an example, back up until 1975, we had over 70% of the households, mother and father were in those households. We fast forward today, depending on the region of the country, right now, some of those houses, it has dropped at least, it's down at least less than 30% where mother and father are in the house. Because now what you see most of it now, mom is working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to make sure. A lot of times Black fathers are nowhere around. And until we deal with that aspect, because one of the things that you see as a result of the Black family not being intact, a higher incarceration rate that we've never had before in the Black community, even though we didn't have the income, but we have an incarceration rate. We have a suicide rate among Black adults and youth that is out of proportion as it relates to the rest of the populations in the United States. That's as a result of the Black family. The level of poverty has grown, even though we got more degrees than we've ever had. We have supposedly more wealth, but the Black family is missing. So the delinquency that's there, the abuse that is there, the lack of attention and time for our children is growing. And so we see all of that, and that's because the Black family is not intact to a degree.
Understood.
Number 2, how America would benefit from complete reparations. It will aid in the elimination and systemic systemic Black illiteracy, the high school dropout rate, and reduce the prison population. If we got the family intact, we see conclusively in the research that has been done that those things have increased at high numbers, disproportionate numbers as far as the Black community. And again, it correlates and it's related to the fact that the Black family is not intact. Those are just a couple things out of 10 items that we have listed that round out how America would benefit from complete reparations. And when I say complete reparations now, we're not talking about the political patchwork. Anything else that you see out there talking reparations, if it's not complete, it ends up being political patchwork, to be honest with you. And then we don't see the actual restoration and transformation of the Black masses and our Black families without complete reparations.
And so we will find ourselves in a situation which the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan highlighted, where we'll receive money and then we'll turn right back around and give that money right back into the hands of those who are the children of our former slave masters. So there will be no benefit to us collectively as a result.
Absolutely.
I want to also get into you have, I tell you guys, you really have to get your copy on Friday. And just if we can mention quickly, how do you get a copy of the National Declaration for Reparations?
Well, you'll be able to go to our website, the National Reparations Summit.org, and you'll be able to download.
The National?
Huh? I didn't hear.
Is it the National?
No, just National Reparations Summit.org.
Gotcha.
And you'll be able to go to the website. The book, it is ebook. You'll be able to download it, or you'll be able to order your copy, either one. And then two, if you're local in Atlanta, you'll be able to get it at the Black bookstores here in Atlanta. We have the Nubian bookstore out in South Lake Mall. If you're in Atlanta, Madu bookstores will have it. The Shrine of the Black Madonna. And then two, if you want to, you'll be able to come by the National Reparations Institute here in Atlanta, and we will personally sign or autograph your copy of the National Reparations Declaration. National Reparations Declaration. We'll be able to do that. Or you can call us at 404-855-5223. 404-855-5223. And you'll be able to order your copy. We'll put it in the mail for you. And you'll be able to get that copy within about 5 to 7 business days. We'll have it out to you.
Awesome. Now, one of the other things that I noticed, because you said you brought the calculations, and you actually brought calculations.
Yes.
The formulas, everything. And one of the things that kind of stood out was land stolen from Black people in America is approximately 14 million acres.
Yes.
And so I wanted to ask you, does this declaration address our form of reparations, including land or a separate state or territory to call our own?
Oh, absolutely. We would be remiss in our duty, and we would have sold out and compromised the reparations movement without the land question without addressing the land question. Because remember, all liberation struggles around the world is about land. And again, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, if we're not talking about millions of acres of land, then all of it is a compromise and sellout. And we know that the dollar is falling. We know too that the reparations can't be about just currency, because at the end of the day, many of our people, based on the miseducation and the psychological damage that has been done, we'll get a check in 6 months. We're broken in the same conditions, and you'll have segments of the white ruling class and white America and us being critical of each other because we have given money to a people who have not been restored mentally and physically. And so them making their decisions a lot of times based on what is socially and emotionally their position, that money will go right back to the banks, the corporations, and everybody else. So the land question becomes key and critical, and we can prove and show we document it. It is not just Professor Muhammad's rhetoric. We document utilizing the citations, and we've done the research and show that Black people lost over 14 million acres of land since our sojourn and since the emancipation proclamation and since what we call the Black Reconstruction, up until today, we've lost over 14 million acres of land. And at the end of the day, we're down to less than 2 million acres of land for 45 to 50 million Black people in America. We're down to less than 2 million acres of land.
And
so the land question is there.
And the 2 million acres of land that we do have, I've been watching in the news where Black farmers are fighting just to keep ownership of the land that they have, as well as I thought was interesting, there are companies like John Deere that the Black farmers have brought I think it's the National Association of Black Farmers that have actually brought a lawsuit against them for things that they have done to disenfranchise Black farmers. So even with us having lost some 12 million or 14 million acres of land, the 2 million that we do have, we're having a tough time maintaining control over. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And remember, though, Professor Karriemah, that one of the things for well over 20 years, Black farmers have been in a legal battle with the federal government, because what we can show conclusively, Black farmers have never been given the compensation that white farmers have been given in America. They were shut out of federal loans, all of that. And they have been shut out of loans, grants, equipment. Strategically, they have done that, because one of the things you see in America, there's a move by multinational corporations to control the farmland. You got multinational corporations that own a lot of the open land and a lot of the major farms in the United States. And so they have attempted to push out not only Black farmers, but white farmers, so they can control, again, the crop. Because of one of the things is that you got companies like Monsanto and others who have attempted to make sure that if you're going to grow anything, you got to use the genetic modified and engineered seeds that they have produced, the chemicals that they have produced, and all of that for growing. And to their credit, a lot of the Black farmers have refused to cooperate with that level of death for our people in the community. And so they have been systematically squeezed out by the federal government. But that has been an ongoing battle with at least 4 or 5 presidents, including President Obama, that Black farmers have been systematically locked out. But in the reparations, the complete reparations question, there's enough money in there for Black farmers to make sure that ceases to ever be a problem again when we secure reparations for Black people in America. That we have the money in the Declaration that will address the needs of Black farmers.
Awesome. So that addresses the land, or the question of land. And I want to thank those of you who have joined me. Quite a few have joined me here on Instagram. We are here with Professor Reginald Muhammad. We're talking about reparations, but in particular, the release on Friday of the National Reparations Declaration. So I want to say peace to the God, Brother Born Talib. Thank you for joining me. World Free COVID-19. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. If you have any questions, go ahead and just put it in the comment box, and I'll be sure to ask Professor Reginald your question. Moving on into, now this is a very sensitive aspect of this conversation of reparations. And that is 5 centuries of denial, inequality, neglect, and murder of Blacks. Now, obviously, there is nothing that can be done that will ever, how can I say, completely make us whole when we're talking about the loss of life. Okay.
Absolutely. You're right.
However, you are addressing this particular concern that we have, or plight that we have, that is ongoing, that we're still suffering from injustices, of inequality, of police brutality. This is still very real for us.
Yes.
So what is it that this declaration, how does the declaration in particular speak to this particular issue?
Well, remember, Professor Karriemah, when we start talking about 5 centuries of neglect, denial, inequality, and the murder of Black people, though we can never really put a price on that. You are absolutely right. To do that would be an insult on those who have lost their lives and others. But we know in law, when there's a loss, of life, when there has been damage, when there's been neglect, when there's been inequality in law, you generally, when you're suing someone, you have what you call compensatory damages as well as punitive damages. And so what we've attempted to quantify here in the declaration, covering, because there can be no price put on it, but what you will attempt to do is look at what would be the punitive damages in a case of an individual or a group of people who have been harmed or wronged. And so what we do is quantifying this. What we do is we look at what would be the punitive and the compensatory damages to make a person or a group or an individual's whole again. And that's what we deal with in point number 3 about 5 centuries of denial, inequality, neglect, and the murder of Black people. And there's enough trillions of dollars that they owe us that, yes, that will that's how you would answer and deal with that. But you got to realize, though, here's one of the things that has happened, though, that has caused the wealth gap, the inequality. Black people were systematically denied and locked out of things like the GI Bill. Thousands and thousands of Black soldiers, female and male, have been systematically locked out of the GI Bill. What they call the Homestead Act, where whites were given land, millions of acres of land. White farmers and residential families were given millions of acres of land. That never happened for Black people in America. And we were here working at that time as taxpayers, and then we worked for 300 years with no pay. So that's what we're attempting to address in that area of forced-free labor. We deal with it. Point number 3. The neglect, the denial. And again, our people were denied programs that were already in place. The Homestead Act, particularly, and the GI Bill. Remember, Blacks have fought in every war. Female and male have been, they fought in the Civil War. Blacks fought in the Revolutionary War. So our people have paid their dues, and we have been taxpayers. And then remember, they worked our people for 300 years with no pay. And we produce the wealth in this country, so we're entitled to any of the benefits and the programs that others have gotten that Blacks have not gotten.
And there's something that you actually highlight under the Homestead Act within this declaration that shares with us that 246 million acres of land were given to white families under the Homestead Act. And
absolutely,
that is a profound amount of land to be given to former slaveholders in most cases. And then for us not to be able to have that same benefit. So let's pivot. Let's now move into education.
Okay.
How do we address education under this national reparations declaration?
Well, one of the things that we're clear about, and you being an educator yourself, Professor Karriemah, you know that when you have a people who have been traumatized, terrorized, tortured, and tormented, robbed of the knowledge of themselves completely, and then you said that you're free to go, and after the Emancipation Proclamation, they say you're free, then doing Reconstruction. Well, we know what has happened is that what we have now, we had a lot of miseducation, and then we had a lot of institutional training. So as a result of that, reparations has to deal with the fact that Black people have been miseducated. So again, I'm gonna give you an example. A lot of times when we started to teach Black history in this country, we start at the Civil Rights Movement. We start with slavery. Well, what about the great empires that Black people built around the world. What about in what they call Africa today? We know it as ancient Kemet yesterday. But what about the great empires? Remember, we're the mothers and fathers of math, music, language, art, culture, religion, spirituality, philosophy, ethics, engineering. These are Black people. We can prove that in no limit of time. But do the masses of our people know this? Generally not. I wasn't taught a lot of this in elementary, middle school, and high school. So our people and white America don't know the contributions of Black people. But they don't realize all of there are literally thousands of inventions in America that Black people, female and male, are responsible for. And they own the patents at one time for these inventions. But the contributions, we have to be re-educated. And that education cannot come from our former slave masters and now their children and grandchildren. Can't be. Because what other self-respecting people who are self-determining will allow their former slave masters and the murderers of their people, allow them to have the responsibility of educating them now? Wouldn't happen where you have a class of people that are self-respecting and self-determining. And so we have to be re-educated. But that paradigm of education has to come from our best minds who are experts in education. And we have a slew of them now, brothers and sisters, who have gotten a more of an African-centered, if you would, education, or a Black emphasis on education, as opposed to the strictly Eurocentric way and paradigm that many of us are victims of. And again, until we do that, we don't fall in love with self. See, when you become educated about yourself, you have a knowledge of yourself. So I'm not impressed with all of the degrees that we have. We have the bachelor's, the master's, the PhD. But what I can suggest to you, much of that has become institutional training as opposed to education. How can I prove that? Well, where are our critical thinkers then? If you say that you are educated now and you got a degree. But what I'm suggesting too is that a lot of the garbage that you're feeding our children now is from your former slave masters' great-grandchildren now. And it's just a Eurocentric model. And that's one reason why our children are rejecting the educational model.
Right.
And so, but there are models, success models, starting with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. There are successful models of education, and there's a slew of other Black scholars and educators who have done a great job in building institutions that are now properly educating our children. But our children have to be re-educated, because if they start to be re-educated, they're going to fall in love with who they are. And when you fall in love with who you are, you will do for yourself. You will respect yourself. You will develop yourself. You will defend for yourself. All of that with education. And you won't destroy yourself. And you will take better care of yourself if you're properly educated. And so we part of the reparations package is that we have to identify our Black scholars and educators who are doing a great work and who are building institutions around education. But that model for the remainder of the 21st century has to be as a result of us funding that and properly funding and equipping those educators so they can expand and do a greater job of educating our children and even our adults too. We all, and the only thing I can claim is I'm a student working hard to become a better student myself. So because all of us have been victims, all of us have been victims of the miseducation. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson talked about it in the book, 1934 published work, The Miseducation of the Negro. And a slew of others have wrote books on our miseducation.
Well, I'm working on being a student too, Professor Reginald,
I am too.
Which is one of many reasons why we have BBI talks, because I want to learn from the guests that come on the show. Oh,
absolutely.
So that's why I'm always in a position of asking questions, because I just want to know more. And like those who are watching, they want to know more too. So we are all in a classroom
and I'm
awaiting the master teacher.
Oh yeah, and
waiting for his arrival.
Well, I'm in the classroom myself with the other students all the time, because I'm constantly learning. wherever we
Yeah.
go and wherever we engage, even with my students, even with my children, even with family members. From my mother, she's still teaching at 85 years old, and she's still teaching me and correcting me. So it's a blessing. And because we have been miseducated, that's part of the reparations package that at the end of the day, we become re-educated and properly educated.
Absolutely. Now, I also notice in within this declaration that you have and your team have taken great care in researching products that and what these products were worth. Can you kind of speak to what this is supposed to illustrate to the reader?
When you say which products, Professor Karriemah?
Well, you have it broken down state by state. So North Carolina,
okay, gotcha. Okay.
Different industries, whether it be agriculture, manufacturing, mining. You got the state
absolutely.
of Georgia, Kentucky.
Exactly.
What are you sharing with us in this particular part of the declaration?
Well, Professor Karriemah, and to the audience, there is no credible reparations organization out there today, no credible scholar or so-called expert on reparations who's attempting to secure reparations for Black people in America. They're not talking about or have expressed that there is a land issue and a land question. Well, what we've attempted to do in the declaration, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that bottom line, we need at least 8 to 10 states. Well, we have identified 12 states that would be key and critical. And to his credit, the great work of one of the senior fellows here at the National Reparations Institute and researcher, Michael Muhammad, looking at these states, he's shown conclusively in those states why those states are strategically beneficial and why they're necessary for Blacks in the question of reparations. Some of those states have direct outlets to the sea. Black people have to start importing and exporting goods and services. Some of those states are good with thousands of acres of farmland. We know that we can do the residential piece and we have the cities, but what about these rural areas in some of these states that have rural areas of vast acres of farmland? Some of those states are due and are owed to Black people. So we've attempted to identify what crops that you can grow on in certain states, what crops that will grow well, what time of the year, how many acres are in that state that is available for farming. Because again, we have to be able to feed. If you say you're independent and reparations, we've gotten complete reparations, that means that we don't have to go back and beg and ask anybody for anything now. We don't even have to ask European people or Monsanto or all these other multinational corporations to feed us. We got Black folks with degrees in agriculture and engineering, but where are your farms though? Organization-wise, there are individuals who own farms and some organizations that own farms, but where is it? We don't have not an inkling of the farmland that we need to feed 45 to 50 million Black people in America and growing. So again,
that's right.
So one of the things that we identify again in the declaration, at least 12 states that are key and critical for the reparations question. Now, will we get all of those states? Maybe not, but we will get some of them, or some territory that we can call our own. And if you say you're independent and you're self-respecting and self-determining, you will have some states and territories that you control as a people. And for those on the broadcast who say, well, that's impossible, they're not going to do that in America. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. If you ill affect or enhance their power base, their profit base, their policy base, and their privilege base, it will happen. And when the Mormons decided that they needed to be able to express themselves culturally, economically, socially, and educationally, there's a vast population of Mormons who are in the state of Utah. And we don't see that as a problem. So why would we have a problem with Black people controlling states and territories with all of the degrees we got, all the training? We do it for other people, but when will we get up and do it for ourselves? When we do that, we'll see the restoration and the transformation of Black people around the land question. That land question becomes very important.
And I'm so glad that you highlighted the Mormons, because one of the things, as you know, my husband, he's been embarking on a study of sovereignty, of the establishment of a separate state or territory, right?
Okay.
And with the Mormons, what makes that so beautiful is that once they began to identify where they wanted their community to move, they all moved in great numbers. But then the next thing they did was that they began to be politically engaged. So they began electing other Mormons into leadership positions in areas that were overseeing the territory where they are. Right? And these were like-minded individuals. And see, it's important that we say that, because sometimes when we look at Atlanta, we think, oh, well, Atlanta is that place. You know, a whole bunch of Black people moved to Atlanta and we are in positions of leadership. Yes, but we're not like-minded Black people who are in positions of leadership that have a vision in which we want to have greater control over our destiny. And that is the difference.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
that's that deal breaker. And that's why we haven't seen the level of success that we could get in the city, is because we don't have that type of unity or unification of thought, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'm thinking about the family. I think it was 12 families that just secured 92 acres of land
in South Georgia.
In South Georgia, and
Absolutely.
How they were able to do that is like-minded family members, right? Or like-minded families came together, right? They had a common vision, and they went after that land. In terms of the education, I wanted to share this briefly. I want to say it was maybe about 15 years ago, or maybe 20. I'm dating myself, y'all. The state of Oregon actually did a pilot on something called Baseline. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not.
But basically what they realized is that to speak to having more of a culturally relevant pedagogy that they would be teaching from. They felt, what would happen if we really presented a more holistic approach to education in terms of featuring the contributions of all of the people.
Okay.
And so they called in different great educators and thinkers and historians, and each one of them we lost. Okay. And each one of them covered a different community or segment of our community that they would present the information with, the historical information with. So there were a group of historians and educators that handled or addressed the contributions of Black people, the contributions of Native Americans, the contributions of Asian Americans, and they did such a beautiful job. And then they presented that as baseline education. And I thought that was a wonderful step in the right direction, because even as we talk about reparations, we have to be willing to, how can I say, understand and appreciate not only the contributions of Blacks in this country, but also the relationships that we have had with other communities like Native Americans, and the contributions that we were able to make collectively.
Absolutely.
And a prime example of that is the legendary Wall Street, Black Wall Street. It wasn't just Blacks from America that made that successful.
Absolutely.
It was Blacks and Native Americans. So I just wanted to bring this because it now moves into another question that I've had, and you know how I feel about it.
Okay.
And that is, who should benefit from reparations? You know, now I just want to give you a little bit of a background about my family because it helps to illustrate this dilemma that I have of understanding how reparations should be applied. Okay. So my mother, her family is from this itsy bitsy town that doesn't even exist on the map anymore, called Frogtown in Savannah, Georgia. Okay. So obviously ADOS, which was it African descendants of slaves?
Exactly.
They would be championing reparations from my mother's side of the family, right?
Okay, exactly.
However, on my father's side of the family, they're from Jamaica and Barbados, man, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is from the Caribbean islands, right? Yes. So there are organizations that would say, no, they're not they're not descendants of slaves, so there shouldn't be any reparations conversation involving them, right?
Okay.
But then I have an aunt who is the half sister of my grandmother, may God be pleased with them both.
Okay.
Where their mother was half Black and half Native American.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So now we have this indigenous conversation.
Exactly.
With this being the reality for many of us who are here in America that are Black. What does that do to the conversation about reparations? And then in particular, how does it relate to this national reparations declaration? I know that was a long way of stating it, but I just wanted to set up an example of where this conversation can really kind of take another turn.
Well, Professor Karriemah, one of the things that we can show conclusively, you mentioned ADOS, but that is a recent organization regarding reparations. Only in the last few years that they have established themselves. They have done a great body of work. Where we have made the mistake, though, Sister Karriemah, and there are a slew, I can say at least 12, 13 organizations who have established themselves in the United States for Black reparations. The problem with the whole reparations movement is fragmented. I did that in a whole master thesis. My whole master thesis, I deal with the fact that the reparations movement in Black America is fragmented. Because, see, this is part of it because of what happened to us as a people. The psychological damage to us as a people, we're fragmented over reparations. This is how the white ruling class know that you're not ready for reparations. Because if they go to ADOS, there's one perspective of reparations. If they go to NCOBRA, which I'm a member of, there's another perspective of reparations. If they go to the Institute of the Black World, Professor Ron Daniels, Dr. Ron Daniels group, there's a different approach. If you go to the All African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, there is another approach for reparation. And so what we know is that the movement is fragmented. And I do a whole 110-page thesis just on the fact that the movement is fragmented. So the objective is to consolidate it. And that's why we dealt with the National Reparations Summit, to bring all of the heads to the table. Because one of the things that I'm assured of, the enemy will know when we're ready for reparations when we consolidate the movement. Because if you go to the various organizations right now online, you'll see different approaches to the reparations. So the white ruling class and those who have to decide on reparations, they're scattered and fragmented anyway. That's one reason why Black people have gone longer than anybody in America and the reparations question has not been formally addressed up until recently because of the fact that the movement is scattered and fragmented. And only recently, there's a segment of the Black middle class or the bourgeois sector who have accepted the fact that reparation is something that is legitimate. Because 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had this conversation because there are a number of Blacks who said, well, that's extreme, that's radical, they will never pay you all reparations. But if you adopt what we have designed at the National Reparations Institute, the collective culture model to secure reparations for blacks in America, this can be over and done within 5 to 7 years. But blacks have to be united. We have to be united because we can't secure reparations.
So how do we unify under what? Well, first of all, how do we do it? And then what will that look like? Because oftentimes when you tell people that you have to unify, they believe that they have to forego their principles, right?
Yes.
So how do you do that, and what does that look like?
Well, first thing, one of the things that we did this past summer to an effort, a small step of uniting the movement, we invited everybody to the National Reparations Summit. It was a virtual summit, and it was an actual on the scene, an actual location of the summit. It happened at the Apex Museum here in downtown Atlanta. And Mr. Dan Moore, one of the great historians and business persons, nonprofit organization, the Apex Museum, hosted us for 3 days, and we invited everybody from all of the different factions of the reparations movement, because there are a number of issues that we all agree on, and there are a number of issues that we don't agree on. And so once we consolidate the movement, reparations is assured. But blacks, a movement that is fragmented, that's one reason why reparations has never been taken seriously for blacks in America. And the quicker we consolidate the movement, the quicker we will eventually be on the road to actually securing reparations. Reparations is not a 20 and 30-year process. People say, I've heard people in reparations movement say, well, we're doing this for our children, so we won't live to see it. Well, the reason you won't live to see it because you have not consolidated the movement. But this is not rocket science. There are others who have gotten reparations in a shorter span of time than we have. The Japanese here in America have gotten reparations, but there was a level of unity. And then two, there was a model in the methodology that was presented. Give an example. We've had blacks in the reparations movement who come from the legal angle for reparations. So they have filed lawsuits over the last 10 years to secure reparations for blacks in America. That is one aspect of it. That is what we call the tort model. But I suggest it won't be the tort model. It won't be the legislative model. It won't be the conversational model that will secure reparations for blacks in America. We were blessed to do a thesis, my master's thesis. Well, we attempted to design and had to design a model which I call the collective culture model to actually secure reparations for blacks in America. But that means that you consolidate the forces, and whatever we all agree upon, that's what we will utilize in order to bring our case before Congress to really establish reparations. And again, we pull from all of the existing models, whether it be the tort model, the conversational model, or whether it be the legislative model. We pull from all of those models in order and design what we call the collective culture model to actually secure reparations for blacks in America. And again, I said all that to say this doesn't take 20 years to do. We can do this within a decade, or sooner. We can actually secure reparations, because of what I do know for a fact. There is a white ruling class that their decisions are based on will it enhance or ill affect their power base, their profit base, their policy base, and privilege base. And we utilize that. We won't even have to march to get reparations. We won't have to picket. We won't have to petition to get reparations.
So would you say that the National Reparations Declaration is that straight line that connects all of the universal items that the various reparation-oriented organizations desire? Is this common? Have you identified that common thread and have put that common thread into this declaration?
Absolutely. We've attempted to do that. And it was not just me, it's a team.
Wonderful.
There is a team.
Woo!
And again, that common thread.
Off of things.
Exactly. And I'm saying this with all sincerity and with all humility. those in the reparations movement who reject this document, then I've got to ask, why do you reject it? Because I've utilized the work of all of the reparations movement. I've been in a participant, not as a reader of reparations, but as a participant of the reparations movement over 27 years now. And so at the end of the day, those who would be critical of this, they're suspect. And I say that with all humility. They're suspect. If they reject the declaration on the National Reparations Declaration, then you got to ask why. Because we've crunched the numbers in here.
That's right.
And I've taken a page from all of their bodies of work and give them credit for it. So why is it
beautiful?
Why is it that you reject the National Reparations Declaration? Because I humbly submit that if you ask all who are espousing reparations, they have plans and programs, but the model and the methodology is missing though. And then two, what they have not done in many instances, we have not quantified. If you ask a number of scholars who were on last week, last month, and last year, what does reparations look like? Well, we gotta figure that out, and we'll get back with you and on it. But in the declaration, we actually crunch the numbers and come up with the actual tally of what minimally you have to come to the table with. We're not saying that's the max, but the minimum, you got to come to the table with a minimum of $83 trillion for Black people in America. And Brother Michael Muhammad,
I love this.
And Sister Wendy Muhammad at the Institute, they have done a great work and have calculated and recalculated to make sure that we're on point. This is not a bunch of theory, guesswork. This is months in the working and research to come up with the declaration.
Well, I think this is awesome, and I hope and I pray that the National Reparations Declaration is going to be purchased by the leadership of all of these reparation organizations out there, so that we can be on one accord when it comes to our demands, our declarations and our demands, right? Yes. And I also would ask that we who aren't necessarily actively engage in the reparations conversation also get this book, so that way we can understand what has happened and what was lost and what is a meaningful redress for our condition. Because I think sometimes this conversation, reparations, can seem a bit overwhelming for us. I love the fact that once someone asks the question, okay, well then what is it that you want? I'll be able to pick up that book and say, this is what I want right here. Absolutely. Right? This is what I want right here. And it's not incongruent with what we are taught if you are Muslim followers of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as taught by his best student, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I think it's important to share that, because they may not know what it is that you, the plan in which you're following, that is leading us to the final solution, and that is separation. But as what has been taught to us, we cannot separate with nothing in hand.
Exactly. Exactly.
There is no establishment of a separate territory to call our own with no money.
Exactly.
Right?
With Sister Karriemah,
with no land.
Absolutely. Professor Karriemah, you're absolutely right. Do you know that's one of the fears of our people? And think about it like this, Sister Karriemah. One of the things that happened as a result of our enslavement and the atrocities and the trauma that we have suffered, it has produced a level of fear in us. And we were blessed to coin the term caucophobia. Caucophobia, the collective fear or intimidation of European people, or those who classify themselves as Caucasian, white, Aryan, or Jewish. caucophobia, the collective fear or intimidation of European people or those who classify themselves as Caucasian, white, Aryan, or Jewish. Do you know that there are blacks? Mm-hmm. They're on the reparations bandwagon recently because Europeans have said that blacks are due reparations. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I could have not had some of the same conversation or this level of conversation. And too often, Sister Karriemah, is that when you start talking about land, well, that's one of the things that frighten black people. If you say, well, we have a choice, and we're talking territories and land for blacks to be self-governing, self-defining, self-respecting, and self-determining. Well, that frightens some black people, even though they know that for over 300 years, they worked our people with no pay. They know all of the atrocities and the history of the mass murder of us as a people. They know the continued discrimination, the denial and the neglect of black people. And now we can do that. We can help everybody else build empires and governments and systems. But what about for yourself? And so when you start talking
that's right.
a separate state or a territory, that's very frightening to our people. But where else, when you have a people who are not self-respecting and who have been hurt and traumatized, it's like a bad relationship, Sister Karriemah. We have women who have been brutalized in multiple relationships. And you say, well, why won't she leave then? Well, the damage has been so done, she don't even know outside of that realm what is possible now, because she's been socially isolated to the degree and been brutalized. And so you say, man, she has been a victim of multiple bad, abusive relationships. Well, that's black people in America. And so now black people got degrees and everything, but they don't think that they can set up financial centers for themselves. They don't think that they can be self-governing for themselves. So that's one of the struggles in the reparations movement, is that because reparations, complete reparations, does answer the question, the land and the territory question, and the question of separation. I'm talking complete reparations. If you're getting anything outside of that, it's not complete reparations. And I defy any scholar or any expert on reparations to argue with me intelligently if you're not talking the land question, and us having separate states and some territory of our own.
Now, Professor Reginald, this is something that I've always wondered, especially in the conversation about reparations. Okay. Now, when you look into the Jewish community, and I'm not saying under any circumstances that whatever they have done in terms of making sure that their children never forget the atrocities that they suffered at the hands of the Germans.
Absolutely.
I'm in agreement with that. I'm in so much in agreement with that I believe that we too should be teaching our children about reparations and the need for reparations. And so I'm wondering, with this National Reparations Declaration that's coming out on Friday, is there anyone who is a part of your team, or is there another organization in which that you can partner with that can also develop materials that our schools like a MUI, like a Blackstone Academy, like a Imhotep Academy, like a homeschoolers, African-centered homeschoolers network, can then incorporate into their programs that can teach reparations? Because the way you have this laid out with your team, and big ups to Brother Mark?
Michael,
no, Brother Michael
Michael
and
Muhammad.
Sister Wendy.
Yes.
Brother Michael and Sister Wendy, for the awesome amount of research, and as well as yourself, brother, the awesome work that you've done with this. I really would love to see this also translate itself into materials for our young people. Because I think at the end of the day, even though we are seeking to have this in place long before they become adults, we need someone to propel this even beyond, right?
Yes.
So that we do not lose like we did in the civil rights movement, the purpose behind the struggle,
Absolutely.
right? So in the civil rights movement, it wasn't about trying to be in the same schools as white people,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
It was about having equal access to the things that white people had access to at that time. And I would hate for us to lose the soul of this movement because we're not sharing it with the generations after us. So I know I've said a lot, but I just wanted to get your take on what I'm sharing with you.
Let me address one of the points that you made. When we did the National Reparations Summit, Professor Karriemah, we invited from all the major reparations organizations and leaders. None of them can say, well, Professor Muhammad, we did not get an invitation. We sent out not only a press release, but all of those organizations, and some of them I'm a part of, and they were invited. And so what we were able to get from there, we have 9 committees from that National Reparations Summit. And the committee is broken down to education. There's an education committee. There's a land committee. There's a financial and economic investment committee. We have brothers and sisters from different organizations, different walks of life, who are part of those committees. And what we will have, what's coming is a National Reparations Report, Volume 1. Now that would be possibly 200 pages now. We couldn't come out with that. Most of our people don't have time and won't read that. But for the congressional people who are implementing reparations for Black people in America, once it's been decided on by Congress and it's been implemented, well, they will have the report to start to build educational institutions. You say what the curriculum looks like. Well, we have Dr. Chika Okoye, one of the great educators of our time, who's a part of the committee. Where I have Monica Smith out of Orlando, Florida, Daytona Beach area. I should say Daytona Beach. That area, we got educators that are part of that committee. Every 9 committees, we got experts, and these are people who are not members of the Nation of Islam. They're members of different organizations. They bring a level of expertise to the table. What we agree on is that this is complete reparations, and so those committees are essential to having a complete reparations package. And then when we started to implement reparations economically, politically, socially, educationally, and culturally, then we already have that volume will be published later on by the National Reparations Institute, but it will spell out conclusively and comprehensively, it will lay out what that plan should look like education-wise. Give an example. One of the things that we talk about, we're not talking about a lot of currency in reparations. A lot of Black people say, well, Negroes just want a check, they don't want to work. Well, a lot of that is not about a check. That's about starting with the land question. Not only equipment, we need billions of dollars of equipment for farming equipment, irrigation systems, all of that. When you start talking about farming, when you start talking about financial institutions, the complete reparation package calls for us having at least a minimum of 10 banks, nationwide banks, that we put our own money into it, financial institutions. That's the complete reparations package. Anybody not talking that, they're not talking complete reparations. They're talking political patchwork. So to answer your question, we have committees in nine different committees that will answer and that will help us distribute the $83 trillion of goods and services and currency that they owe us. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. It does. And that addresses in terms of the grander scale of implementation of reparations. But what I was referring to in particular is, how do you translate this National Reparations Declaration into a workshop or a seminar or
Absolutely.
a class that can be taught to younger generations? That's what
Absolutely.
I'm referring to.
Okay.
That can't wait until that 200-page report comes out and funds are dispersed before they get that information. They need that now in real time.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to give crazy shout outs to those of you who just joined us on Instagram. Thank you very much. Brother Black Bottom Cafe, brother, or maybe sisters, pardon me, Samiracle Hazika. Thank you for joining. We appreciate you coming on BBI Talks. And I want to thank those of you who are joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Please don't forget to turn on your notifications, subscribe, hit like, share, all that good stuff. And we're about to bring this conversation to a close. I'm about to get the final thoughts from Professor Reginald, so feel free to collect your thoughts on what you want to share.
Yes.
I want to make everybody aware that you can also secure your sponsorship of BBI Talks, and it's a very nominal rate. There are no contracts. You can email me at yearoflotus@gmail.com, and I will be more than happy to shout out your business, products, and services. We're on the heels of our boycott. It's coming up with Jesus, down with Santa. However, we are spending money with Black-owned businesses. So this is a great opportunity for you to showcase your business on the Blackest Business Show, BBI Talks, right?
Yes.
So feel free to do so. And I want to make sure that you also know where you can get your National Reparations Declaration that comes out this Friday, okay? You can go to nationalreparationssummit.org. Is that correct?
Yes. National Reparations.
Yes.org. So
Summit.org.
nationalreparationssummit.org. And if you would like to sign on with one of those 9 committees that they have, education, land, economic investment, feel free to also go on that site, leave your inquiry on the contact page, and they will, I'm sure, get back with you. So, Professor Reginald, any last thoughts on this conversation about the National Reparations Declaration?
Yes, and to answer one of your questions quickly, we do have an educational committee that addresses our youth. We have actually youth that are part of the National Reparations Summit, who some of my former students from the Atlanta University Center. And then we have youth training. And then again, this spring, we will, all those 9 committees will break down and have their own individuals, virtual summits and workshops to address what you asked about earlier, especially around education. That's not my field. We bring in a team of at least 10 sisters and brothers who are experts in that area, who will help address and how we get that information, package it, that our youth can take it and start to utilize it, and we implement it not 10 or 20 years from now, but in the up and coming months. Also, reparations, the National Reparations Declaration, it will be out this Friday. You'll be able to go to our website and download it. Also, your copy for one of your digital gadgets, you'll be able to download it, no problem. Or you can call us at the office at the National Reparations Institute at 404-855-5223. Again, 404-855-5223. And I ask that you read it from cover to cover. It is not 200 pages. It's not 100 pages. It's only 54 pages, but it's documented. We take the emotion out of my brother always tells me, let's take the emotion out of it. Let's look at it from a business and a practical standpoint. And so that's what we have done with the declaration. And I honestly ask those of you all, or you can email us to email us at the National Reparations Institute at gmail.com. Again, 3 words, National Reparations Institute at gmail.com. Any comments, concerns, or any criticism you have, please address us at the National Reparations Institute at gmail.com, or call us at 404-855-5223. And again, what the declaration does, Sister Karriemah, is one of the things that the objective was, as far as the National Reparations Institute and the National Reparations Summit, was to consolidate the movement. Number 1, control our own narrative. Come out with the declaration come out with a declaration, number 3, of what reparations look like, and then be on the road to secure reparations for Black people in America. And I'm talking about within the next 5 to 7 years. Number one, consolidate the movement because it's fragmented right now. Number two, control our own narrative. Everybody jumping out here on reparations now. Some just jumped on the bandwagon. We got Marianne Williamson. We thank her, who was one of the first presidential candidates to raise the question of reparations, but she cannot speak for Black people and tell us and give us her lowball dollar amount for what reparations look like. So we have to control our own narrative. See, no self-respecting people will allow you to control the narrative. The Jewish people are not going to tell you what the Holocaust, how that should be framed and how it should be funded. So we're not going to allow that in the reparations movement either, or the Native Americans who have gotten reparations, nor the Japanese who have gotten reparations. And then to your audience, reparations is not new. America has paid reparations. Even the former slave owners, once slavery was over, many of the plantation owners received reparations. That has happened around the world.
That's right.
When finally the Haitians kicked the several countries, European countries out of Haiti, they ended up paying reparations. Up until 1947, the Haitian people were still paying reparations to the British, to other other European countries. They have paid reparations. So reparations is not new for the United States. Reparations is not new for any European country. They've all received reparations after the enslavement of our people around the world, even from other Caribbean nations and islands. They have gotten reparations from. So reparations is not anything new. It's just time for us to get our reparations. And the Declaration for Black people in America, it answers that question. And again, what you'll also find in the Declaration, what we call some undisputed truths. If you read this Declaration and you want to go and take a vaccination with the vaccines coming out, you're not informed. But we document what their politicians have said and what their educators have said about vaccinations in the Declaration for Reparations. You'll find that in the Reparations Declaration. And let me close with one quote from Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who was clear on the reparations question. And then we'll close out, and if there's any questions. Here's what Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois says about this. This is what he says, and this is how we close out the Declaration. Would it not be wise for American Blacks themselves to read a few books and do a little thinking for themselves? It is not that I would persuade Blacks to become communists, capitalists, or holy rollers, but whatever belief they reach, for God's sake, let it be a matter of reason, not of ignorance, fear, and selling their souls to the devil. W.E.B. Du Bois, from The World in Africa.
Profound.
So
profound. And I thank you for sharing. No, please. I'm sorry.
Yes, but we
National Reparations Declaration.
Exactly. A qualitative and quantitative framework for Black redress. It's not all the end of the research, but it does provide the framework, and we do crunch the numbers in here that people will walk away knowing that we're on the right road. We have laid out the case.
That's right.
You don't have to guess and speculate what the numbers look like. I know that there are others who've jumped out there and said that, well, we need $14 trillion to close the wealth gap. That's a portion of it. That's only a small portion. We applaud Brother Ice Cube and the work that he's done. We applaud T.I. We applaud all of them for
Black
the work.
America.
Yeah, we applaud them for their contracts on Black America and their agenda, Killer Mike and all of them. But what I want to share with them, and I humbly say to get the National Reparations Declaration, because it completes and pulls all of those numbers together that they have already put out, and we come to the final amount, the minimum amount that we started negotiating with, and that's $83 trillion that is owed to Black people in America. And that's not just the federal government. That is the federal government, along with the states and cities that owe Black people. Number one. Number two, multinational corporations. Number three, nonprofit organizations. There are colleges and universities that owe us. Harvard, Yale, Brown University owned thousands of slaves. We can, that's a whole nother book that we can mention. But also in number 4, there's still, in number 4, Professor Karriemah, there's still over 40,000 plantations that are in existence that we can trace back to slavery and how they made their fortune that still owe us. So there's 4 entities that owe us a minimum of $83 trillion. And then 2, we'll get that over a 20 to 25 year period. That's how you manage that. And that's how it is attainable. And it's something that can happen and will happen. As soon as we consolidate the movement and unite our forces, we're on the road to secure reparations for Black people in America. Thank you all.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much, Professor Reginald Muhammad, for coming back on the show. If you want to get some of that background that he was talking about, you're going to have to watch part 1 of our entitled "A Case for Reparations." It was tremendous. I really just learned so much from that. I just want to make a mention of something because you talked about universities, and there is a court case right now that we need to be paying attention to. That's being championed by Attorney Crum, who does a lot of civil litigation, if I'm not mistaken, on a lot of the social justice or police brutality cases that we've been hearing about, whether it be Trayvon Martin or whether it be most recently, I think he was a part of the Ahmaud Arbery case too, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah, he's done great work, and he's he's based out of Florida. And but he's done a lot of work nationally. He's done a lot of national work with Reverend Sharpton and NAN and other organizations, especially in many of the high-profile cases, even the George Floyd case that we saw this past summer. But a number of cases that he's been a part of, and making sure he represented the family, especially on the civil side of the settlements and lawsuits that have happened based on the murder of our youth.
Absolutely. And the case that I'm referring to is the one that he has filed on behalf of the family whose actual relatives are featured. I know we've all seen the photographs of a Black man who was made a slave, and it's of him and his back is cut up from all of the lashes from the whip, right? You've seen these photographs, right? As well as of a young woman. Well, this was her great ancestors, right? Yes. And so Attorney Crum has filed a lawsuit on the behalf of the family against Harvard University. Yep. Why? Because it was a professor at Harvard University, matter of fact, one of their revered professors, who was responsible for that photograph. And the university has held on to the ownership of these photographs, and the family said, not only do we want it back, but we want the ownership back, and we want them to be compensated for these photographs of our ancestors. And it's somewhere, I think, at about $23 million is the value of these photographs that has become more or less really an asset of Harvard University. And I'm sure there are more universities where that is taking place. And it just really spoke to what you mentioned in terms of this conversation about reparations as it relates to these universities. And it just mind blowing that we as Blacks in America would even have to pay a penny towards our so-called higher education degrees after what we have suffered by way of our ancestors and continue to suffer in this country. I want to thank you again, Professor Reginald, for coming on the show. BBI Talks, we talk about Black business and we talk about Black affairs. I want to thank my brother, Oyiman, for doing the lyrics for my new intro and outro. I want to thank that brother because he put that sauce on it, and I appreciate it. It just makes things just so much better. And I thank you, big brother, for everything. So y'all check him out because he's got an EP that's going to be dropping soon as well. You know, we just like showing love to Black-owned businesses. Next week, come back, 3 o'clock. This is going to be the last conversation before the so-called holiday, right? Yes. And Professor Reginald, you know what we're talking about?
What's that?
On the brink of famine. Okay. Who will feed Black people? That's what we're talking about. On the brink of famine. And if you don't believe that we are on the brink of famine, I suggest that you take a look at these COVID cases that have skyrocketed here in America. I want you to pay attention to Texas, that was on a 24 to 48 hour notification that they will be shut down completely. I want you to take a look at England, that has already shut down. I've been communicating with my relatives out there. It's a wrap. And the more that everything starts to shut down, and we are dependent upon the transportation of our food, and then those crops that may be due for harvest cannot be harvested, depending on how long we continue in a quarantine, the more that you're going to see that our grocery stores that we go to is not going to have food on the shelves. And so we're going to have to start looking to ourselves as a people and come up with meaningful ways in which we can feed ourselves. And so On the Brink of Famine is next week, Wednesday's topic. Same platforms. You can check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, and YouTube. You said there was something you wanted to share before we head out of here?
I wanted to thank you and your audience personally for allowing us to come on and talk about reparations, and then allowing us to make sure that our people are informed about the National Reparations Declaration. I want to thank those who have worked closely with us with the National Reparations Summit and the National Reparations Institute. I want to thank there are a number of editors who worked on this declaration. Also, I want to thank Barbara Shorter. I want to thank Gary Shorter for the excellent editing of the declaration. I want to thank Rico Dollar, who designed it and laid it out for us. So it's not just Reginald Muhammad. It is a team of those who have attempted to do their best work to make sure that we have become well documented and concisely lay out the case for reparations, so we don't have to guess and speculate what those numbers are. We don't have to allow entertainers to say what the numbers are. We have done this and looked at it in a very meticulous way, and hopefully we've laid out, and then we will continue to expand on what we're doing, but we have laid out the case for reparations for our people. And please read it, the document, the National Reparations Declaration. Call us at 404-855-5223. And I'm going to let you know too, Professor Karriemah, I'm going to be the first sponsor, paid sponsor for next week's show.
Hey!
The National Reparations Institute will be one of the sponsors next week. And so we'll talk about that off the air, but we're going to make that happen. Now. And we're going to pay to make sure that that happens. We appreciate your work. We appreciate your platform. Keep up the great work. And a lot of brothers and sisters don't know your work and your background. This didn't just happen 6 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago. I've known you as a communicator on one of the major radio stations back 20 years ago. I knew your work at Clark Atlanta University 20 years ago. So you are certified and qualified to do what you're doing, and we just applaud the effort. I want to thank your husband and your family, because I know they support you in this work. And so keep up the great work.
Yeah.
And to the audience, we thank you. I'm grateful and appreciative. And I thank you again. And to all in the reparations movement, we say assalamu alaikum and peace to all the gods.
Yes, wa alaikum salam, and thank you, big brother. We appreciate all of your hard work, and you are always welcome on BBI Talks. Thank you for watching. Those of you in the audience, this has just been a wonderful presentation, and I'm looking forward to greater and greater presentations going forward. This BBI Talk.
We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad. They gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man. Get what I need out the land. The earth is the kingdom of God. Glad that I know where I am. We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad. They gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man. I can supply you the man. Get what I need out the land. Glad that I know where